in the field, in the drug unit that was started, and Jane was the manager, a lot has happened since she started. And what we are talking about here this afternoon is just one of the outputs that she has initiated. But before I go on, I also want to really like to thank the Open Society Foundations, IPDC, for having me here, and also the organizers. It's great to be around again. So just some background. I've got 13 slides and I won't keep you very long. And if it goes too long, just stop me, please. Some background on this revised AU Plan of Action. It started in March 2017 with the AU STC on health, population and drug control, who firstly recommended the extension of the Plan of Action, the one that ran out in 2017 to 2019, and they requested that we revise the AU Plan of Action, and it must be based on the UNGA's outcome document, the SDG Goal 3 and Target 3.5 on prevention and treatment of substance use, and on the priorities of the first 10-year implementation plan for Agenda 2063. And I believe all of us know about Agenda 2063, which is really the strategic direction that we are all pulling together to. Now, this is the fourth revision of the AU Plan of Action on drug control. The first one was done in '96. Then we had revisions in the years as mentioned there. And then I mentioned the re-establishment of a dedicated drug control unit within the Commission. We had one, and it was dismantled it was basically closed in 2006. But then member states and voices came up saying, no, please, we must do something about this growing problem on the issue on the continent. So since Jane came, there was a strong focus on helping member states to revise their national drug control bodies, because they were there in the 90s and in the beginning of the 2000s, but many of them just stopped functioning. So we did that, and at the moment, 80% of our member states have dedicated drug control commissions that meet regularly. And the drug control strategies were also updated, and hopefully, with this new AU Plan of Action, the revised one, our member states will also revise theirs in line with this, so that again, we pull all in the same direction. The AU also organized meetings in demand reduction, in supply reduction, and in epidemiology lately. And I must say that the AU is also really in the forefront of international cooperation. For instance, like organizing the upcoming ISUP meeting in Nairobi. Now, what was the roadmap and what is to come on the revised AU Plan of Action? Since January 2018, deliberations were held with the AU, and we had basically two options for the format of this document, and we decided, look, very important is that there should be a clear implementation plan, very clearly contained in the Plan of Action, and that it should be really reader-friendly. So we decided on one option. We went through a lot of literature resources and held further deliberations with the African Union and with stakeholders like IDPC and others, UNODC, etc. And we submitted the first draft in May this year. It was circulated to member states, and 20 member states sent their comments. And really, I must say, I told Dr. Jane Marie afterwards, look, the depth of this responses really struck me, that really the debate on drugs is going on in our member states. We know that in Africa we have 55 member states, and they are all at different levels of development, and also when it comes to this issue, there are many different views. But I was really stuck by that. And then also the stakeholder partners, like IDPC, also made wonderful inputs. The same with UNODC, Interpol, and others into this draft. So we incorporated all this back feedback and submitted it on 19 September. We will also be waiting for your inputs on this plan of action, and we will present it at a back-to-back meeting in Nairobi to our member states. It will be considered next year in March, in April, or is it March, the SDC? In April, for adoption by the ministers of Health, Population and Drug Control, and then it will be sent forward for endorsement by the AU Executive Council in June next year. It is based on the 7 pillars of the UNGA's outcome document with 2 additional key priority areas, which I will explain just now, relevant to the African Union. And of course, it incorporates all the AU instruments in the different areas and community realities. It provides an overview of key issues in the introduction. It's got an introductory part, I think it's 9 pages, where we also really received wonderful inputs from member states to give us a snapshot of the issues when it comes to drugs on the continent. And then there's this action-oriented matrix for implementation. Now, the objective of the plan of action is mentioned here, to improve the health, security, and social economic well-being of people of Africa by addressing drug trafficking and problematic drug use in all its forms and manifestations, and preventing the onset of drug use. This is the contents of the plan of action with the introduction that I mentioned, the overall objective that I just read, and then the key priority areas or expected outcomes. And there are 9 of them, as I mentioned. The first one addresses drug demand reduction implemented along with health issues associated with drug use. But really, colleagues, I must say, when you just now presented the model law, I could see, and I think you also picked it up, everything is reflected in this plan of action. So by implementing the plan of action, we will also basically implement the provisions of the model drug law. So I really hope that our member states will also bite into that and make sure and make use of that one. We should really, really advocate for that. Because just recently, I visited a member state on a drug assessment. It was about a month ago, and they still use the 1956 Poisons and Dangerous Drugs Act. Seriously, in the SADC region. These are colleagues that we must sit with and help them, and we can really make use of your plan of action. Of course, when it comes to drug demand reduction, the provisions in the new OPA are, of course, prevention outputs based on prevention science and to be evidence-based. There are treatment outputs on implementation of the AU minimum standards on substance use treatment that was adopted in 2012. We already have that one, and asking for the implementation of that, and of course, for the UNODC standards of treatment. Outputs on low threshold treatment services, where HIV and CV testing opportunities should also be available. It's provided there, and many others. I'm just picking up on some few things here and there. Also, for instance, harm reduction is provided for, that the package of health services for people who inject drugs be implemented in our member states. The availability and access to controlled substances for medical and scientific purposes accelerated with preventing their diversion. The issue of access to essential medicines, that is also what also mentioned by yourself, and the implementation of the AU Common African Position on the availability of pain management drugs of 2012. In supply reduction, Just to pick up on a few provisions there, and there are many, and it's also detailed there. Outputs on updated legislation that I just mentioned. Implementation of the AU roadmap on silencing the guns by 2020. The implementation of the UN, the UNCAC, and the AU Convention Against Corruption, and the AU Strategy Against Proliferation and Trafficking in Small Arms and Light Weapons. They are all in there. Measures to address crime prevention and criminal justice reform focuses or picks up on the TOC and its protocols, and also on law enforcement cooperation with the AFRIPOL that has been established in Algeria, that we have focal points in our police departments to liaise with them. Of course, Interpol liaison, and also with the World Customs Organization. Cross-cutting issues. We call strongly for proportional sentencing and the implementation of the Nelson Mandela, the Bangkok and Tokyo rules in prisons, and of course for the decongestion of prisons. Evolving trends is the focus. We pick up on new psychoactive substances, drug sales through the internet or the dark net, and online child sexual exploitation and violent gangsterism, among others. Alternative development. We ask for the implementation of the first 10-year implementation plan for Agenda 2063, which will result in more inclusive growth and development. We call for the free movement of people, attention to youth and women unemployment, and that social protection measures be rolled out in our member states. We also have the comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, the CADEP, of the AU, and we can see, and it's also provided for that producers of cannabis and khat, etc., can be involved in this program. On international cooperation, of course, it speaks to extradition and mutual legal assistance, issues that is still a big problem within Africa. It's easier to get somebody from Australia extradited than sometimes among our member states. And also, of course, harmonized drug master plans, hopefully in line with this new revised AU plan of action, and of course, that our member states participate actively in the STC at the CND level, in the Honlea meetings, etc. So this implementation matrix contains 6 columns with the objective, the activities or outputs identified, of which I mentioned a few here, a timetable for the implementation, which also somehow hints towards priorities to be attended to, entities responsible, which ministries, and of course indicators, and data collection mechanisms. Because at the end of the day, every second year, data will be, or in fact annually, data will be sent to the AU, and then a report must be collated for the ministers to look at, to see how are we doing in the implementation of this plan of action. An example is, for instance, Objective A1, prevent drug abuse, especially problematic drug use among all age groups and sectors, by applying evidence-based prevention science. Output C, for instance, is to conduct targeted evidence-based social media campaigns for tertiary students and out-of-school youths on drug use risks, with information on pathways to exit a drug use career. Member states involve traditional media in disseminating drug facts to the adult population, with the emphasis on assistance to people who use drugs. Back to work strategies